everyone. My name is Abby Rapoport, and I have the tremendous honor of chairing the Shalom Austin board. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight to learn more about where things currently stand at Shalom Austin and how we are charting our path forward. I don't need to tell any of you that these are uncertain times, and I want to take a moment to acknowledge on a bigger scale both the events on the West Coast that are displacing so many friends and family, and the recent peace treaties in the Middle East that give us reason to hope. The strength of this community has truly carried us through these last 6 months. And normally this time of year, we would be having our annual meeting and welcoming a new class of board members to leadership. However, given the tremendous flux that we're facing this year, our board voted to bring our new board members in the spring. That said, we felt this was still the right time to bring all of you together to give you a picture of where we are and where we're going. I want to especially thank everyone who submitted questions. We will try to address as much as possible in tonight's presentation. During the webinar, you will be able to see us, but we are not able to see you on the screen. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email us after the webinar at ceo@shalomaustin.org. Again, that's ceo@shalomaustin.org. We will also be recording tonight's webinar so we can make it available afterwards. Now, before we get started, I want to acknowledge our top corporate partners this year. And without their generosity, we would not be able to provide the many services and programs for our community and for our most vulnerable populations. So many, many, many thanks to Atria, to Austin Private Wealth, to Bubby Care, to Dochin Realtors, and to the Lowy Law Firm. And it's with this grateful spirit that I share with you our agenda for this evening on your screen. And I introduce our first speaker, Shalom Austin CEO, Rabbi Daniel Septimus.
Erev Tov, everyone. I hope you can hear me clearly. I want to thank Abby Rapoport, our incredible board chair, and everyone that was involved in putting together this State of Shalom Austin. Thank you so much for your participation and help in making this happen. So before you is an image of the wilderness. It's an image that our staff and our board are using to help guide us through this period. And just as our ancestors spent decades wandering through the wilderness with so many unknowns on when they would finally reach the promised land and what life would look like upon their arrival in the promised land, so too are we experiencing this same feeling of unknowns during this time. And like the wilderness, it feels as if the crisis is endless and we don't know what each day will bring. But our Torah narrative teaches us something important. Our ancestors were at their best when they acted as a community, and their worst when they acted as separate tribes and individuals. We also learned that the wilderness can serve as a metaphor for our endless ability to adapt and to learn. I am proud to say that our staff team and community have come together in such profound ways. Our collective actions have enabled us to evolve and provide meaningful impact in ways that we could not have imagined at the outset of this crisis. As you read in Abby and I's email to the community just a few weeks ago, Shalom Austin faces some of the greatest challenges of our existence. A $4 million revenue loss, 1/3 of our total budget almost overnight, has required our organization to take difficult steps toward financial sustainability. Our journey through the wilderness so far has been like a roller coaster. But this I know, I am extremely proud of our staff team and lay leadership and volunteers for the myriad of ways we have evolved and responded. The impact has been and will continue to be tremendous thanks to your efforts, your support, and our entire staff team. This paints a picture of our collective impact, demonstrating an ability to adapt and serve the critical needs of our community in the midst of experiencing our own hardship in the wilderness of this pandemic. In the following slides, you will hear about how we've responded to ensure that our community is receiving the much needed support during this time by convening, running programs online and in person, and raising additional support for emergency financial assistance and our Jewish institutions. Over the past 20 years, I don't have to tell you this, the Shalom Austin J has become a home to our community members and our friends. When we shut down on March 16th, something went missing for our community and for all of us. Thanks to the tremendous work of the member experience team and our greater Shalom Austin team, we reopened slowly, safely, and for those who felt comfortable returning, they were able to be back in their home on the Dell Jewish Community Campus. As Jennifer wrote here at the bottom of this slide, in this tumultuous summer, the JCC has been a positive standout of safety, kindness, professionalism, and effectiveness. Institutionally, you are modeling core values. Supporting families through this crisis has been an important priority for Shalom Austin. We ran 9 successful weeks of camp. It also became apparent that when the fall and the school year was beginning online for all schools, some families needed a place where their children could go so they could continue to support their families through their work. And as you will see, the impact we are providing these families is a relief for all of them. All of these programs are immersed in our values, providing safe and positive programming for our children. Part of our collective impact is when community comes together to support one another, and we convene as partners. As you saw earlier, over 5,000 community members have attended 5 online Kulanu or community concerts moderated by Rabbi Neil Blumoff with clergy representation from our congregational communities. I am proud of our partnership with Austin Jewish Film Festival to provide meaningful film content, access to filmmakers, and programming to our community. And for our partnership with ADL Austin to learn more about racism and anti-Semitism in Austin, difference for the better. You're going to hear more about some additional partnerships in a minute. Finally, knowing the challenging collective impact of this crisis, the Shalom Austin Board of Directors opened a COVID-19 Community Response Fund. And our community has raised to date over $250,000 in unrestricted funds. This fund will be here to support those most vulnerable and in need and ensure that our Jewish institutions who play such a critical role in creating vibrant Jewish life will remain financially sustainable. And these are just a few of the many examples of how our community has been at its best through this time in the world. I don't have to tell you that this crisis has affected so many community members and friends of our Jewish community. From the moment this crisis began, prioritizing those most vulnerable and in need was put first. We know that many have experienced serious financial hardship, and many seniors and young adults who don't have family here in town are feeling severe isolation. Shalom Austin's Jewish Family Service, our adult programs, our young adult division, with the help of volunteers across the community, including from Women's Philanthropy, have stepped up to fill many needs. On the right picture, you have Blanche, someone that is familiar to many of us. The Shalom Austin J, as I said before, is a home, but especially for her and for her senior colleagues. And shortly after COVID began, Blanche was set to celebrate her 97th birthday. Normally, she would celebrate it with her friends at the J. And of course, these are different times, but thanks to the efforts of our staff team, Blanche was able to hop on a Zoom and share her 97th birthday with her friends, her senior colleagues and staff, and everyone who wanted to celebrate with her. I had the opportunity to be on as well. And many of our community members have stepped up with generous donations to ensure that all who are facing financial hardship are supported through this time. Through a new partnership with Bubby Care and its co-founder, Lawrence Mays, which has generated tens of thousands of dollars in support of Shalom Austin Jewish Family Service, we have been able to grow our impact at a critical time. Donna and Philip Berber and Glimmer Austin have stepped up to provide emergency financial assistance and services to seniors in need. Shalom Austin Jewish Family Service has come together with Hebrew Free Loan Association of Austin to share the resources available between the two organizations in need, again, at our best in a time of wilderness. This picture demonstrates how Women's Philanthropy just taken over the last week, is responding to reach our homebound senior population. Over 200 individuals have received and will receive handwritten postcards. 120 seniors will receive fresh honey cakes, which I'm sure are delicious, and approximately 100 will receive Happy New Year's phone calls. So I began with this image, and I will end with this image. In a moment, you will hear about our financial situation, one that is probably the most challenging in our history. But what you have just heard is the incredible collective impact of our staff team, our community members, and our friends. As we dive into the detail of our financial situation and how we're moving forward as Shalom Austin, I hope you will take a moment to pause and reflect on the many ways we can work together to make our way through the wilderness. Let us make a promise that in a year from now, when we are approaching the next Rosh Hashanah, that we are proud of our collective efforts to ensure that every individual, every family in need is cared for, and every Jewish institution in Greater Austin remains viable. Rick Rosenberg, our chair-elect and treasurer, was unable to join us live in person as his flights were changed last minute. However, he recorded a video, which we will share now, that highlights our current financial situation.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you all for attending tonight's State of Shalom Austin. I wanted to give you an overview of what's been happening from a financial perspective, especially since the pandemic started in March. But before I do that, I wanted to really thank our staff, Daniel and his team, for their amazing efforts on our behalf during this challenging time. And I want to especially point out and reach out to our new CFO, Nicole Gilger, for just an amazing effort jumping in January and 2 months later finding herself in the middle of a pandemic. We are fortunate for her efforts, and we would be in a much more difficult situation if she was not, and her team were not part of what we're doing. It may be hard to remember what it was like before the pandemic, but actually we started the year ahead of our plans. Things were going quite well. But once the pandemic in the middle of March became evident, the staff, senior staff, with board oversight, realized that we needed to take actions to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. The need for this is very obvious. About 70% of our annual $12 million budget is generated from earned revenues from things like membership, ECP, and camps, all of which became challenging at best or not able to be used at worst. The impact of this has been that our annual revenues have been reduced by about $4 million per year for this year and projected to be $4 million less for next year. So in May, we made some initial organizational changes on the anticipation that certain activities would return to normal during the summer. At the same time, we were very fortunate to obtain a $1.3 million Paycheck Protection Plan loan from Pioneer Bank. I wanted to give thanks to Eric Cohn for his efforts on helping us make those connections. And that ensured that our immediate cash needs were being taken care of. However, at the same time, let's say fortunately instead of however, at the same time, our community stepped up during the beginning of this process. Our annual campaign donors accelerated their pledges, and in many cases increased their pledges. And for that, we're very grateful. Our JCC members, our ECP families, and others donated their monthly dues, monthly fees to the organization to ensure operations could continue to the best possible and that we would have sufficient cash to maintain our operations. We are very grateful for their support during this very difficult time. At the same time, donors provided funds through the Jewish Foundation community due to the COVID-19 impacts. At the same time, Shalom Austin created the Community Response Task Force, which was formed with other members of the community to help organizations deal with the impacts of the COVID-19. And to date, we've received pledges, commitments of over $350,000 in designated and undesignated funds. More will be coming out in the near future as to how those funds will be utilized. As summer progressed, however, it became evident that the normal that we had hoped to achieve earlier in the summer was not going to be in place. Updated financial projections, very conservative in nature, were prepared based on a scenario planning and analysis of what our real life was going to be like. These updated projections showed $1 million loss for the year 2020 and a $1.3 million loss for 2021. With these significant losses expected under the current environment, changes in our operations were needed, and as Daniel will be discussing next, the organization undertook a very detailed scenario planning process that helped provide the environment for how we would identify new financial plans for our new world. Subsequently to this process, we're pleased to announce that Shalom Austin has been approved for a $1 million loan from the Jewish Community Response and Impact Fund. This is a zero interest loan that will be paid back over a 4-year time period. Our goal for these funds are to be set aside as reserves and not be used in any operations. It is only to be used as an emergency. The financial plan that has been prepared, put in place, and approved by the board is designed to be at worst cash neutral for this year and next year, and hopefully generate positive cash flow to help start increasing our reserves. The financial plan, as approved, also is structured so that our major cash reserves and resources, the JCRF loan of $1 million, our line of credit balance of $750,000, would not be utilized. That those would all be available in the case of a true emergency. Looking forward, initial work has started on implementing the Generations program, utilizing funds that are restricted for use in Generations. The planned expansion and renovation of the campus is critical to ensure the long-term success and financial viability of Shalom Austin. So in conclusion, the plans that have been put in place to ensure the long-term viability of Shalom Austin so we continue our mission of enhancing the quality of Jewish life here in Austin. I thank you for your time. I'm sorry I'm not available for live Zoom tonight as I'm stuck on an airplane due to United Airlines changing plans. But Nicole and Daniel are available for questions, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions going forward. Once again, thank you for your time, and Daniel, I'll turn it back over to you.
A big thank you to Rick for his tireless work and partnership with our CFO, Nicole Gilgers. You could probably hear in the background, he was recording it during some kind of thunderstorm, as you could see the lightning and thunder. So when it became apparent that this crisis would extend beyond a few months and our financial situation was unfortunately not improving, Abby Rapoport, Rick, Rosenberg, and I decided we needed to engage in a scenario planning process to chart a course for the next year plus. And we approached the talented Marcia Silverberg to facilitate the process. We assembled a group of 16 staff members made up of chiefs, senior directors, and directors, and Abby put together a special task force comprised of finance committee and board members to review the work of the staff. And this is an image that was put together, a toolkit, and an image up from the toolkit by the Jewish Federations of North America, JFNA, who received a grant from the Mandel Foundation to support national networks like federations and JCCs, summer camps, day schools, synagogues, in using these tools. The scenarios ask us to respond to this key question. What might the lives of Jewish communal stakeholders look and feel like in the next 16 months or through the end of 2021? It requires us to consider all the plausible worlds we might live in as we develop plans and contingent actions for our work. Specifically, in 1 year from now, based on the data we have today, what world do we think on this chart, in these 4 worlds, would we be living in based on 2 measurements, civic and social gathering on one side and financial sustainability on the other? Ultimately, based on the data today and where we think we will be in a year from now, we believe we will be in a world, as you can see on the top left, of exile. And what does that mean? In other words, we will be on a path to partial recovery in terms of the economy and financial sustainability. But when it comes to civic and social gathering, that most medium and large gatherings will have not returned to normal, still gathering in smaller groups. We were also asked to create what our side bets would be, or worlds that may shift based on the data change on the ground. And at this point, we believe that we are well prepared to move into a world where the world is less financially stable and people remain cautious about gatherings, or we can easily scale up if we are on, God willing, a trajectory towards recovery, both in terms of the economy and people's confidence in returning in person. And with this information in hand, we put together what Shalom Austin will look like if we are living in the world of exile, which Abby will share in just a few minutes, more information about that particular scenario. So the process was a pretty intense process. Over 8 weeks, our staff of 16 completed the work. And on August 5th, we brought that work to a special task force, as I mentioned, of lay leaders, a finance committee, and board members who reviewed the staff work. And from there, the task force and staff brought it to the executive committee for review and feedback and refinement. And then from there, we made a recommendation to the board, and it was approved. The scenario planning process provided clarity in how we would move forward as Shalom Austin. And it allowed us to reorganize Shalom Austin and our staff structure to align with the process to meet what we believe are the ultimate priorities of the organization over the next 12 to 16 months. Sadly, as Rick mentioned earlier, we had to take decisive action on our finances, and that required we make painful cuts to labor, our biggest expense, and to non-labor as well. And we hired Susan, who's virtual CFO's HR practice lead, who has over 35 years in HR experience to guide our staff working group. We collectively read an article on spiritualizing job loss by Dr. Erica Brown and how we can provide additional support for our affected employees. As you will see on this slide, we are supporting affected employees in a number of ways. Specifically, we set up access to pro bono career coaching and resume support by top-notch, well-experienced professionals in our community. And we are also utilizing a newly established resource by Jewish Federations of North America, or JFNA, and an organization called JPRO called RISE to support job loss for Jewish professionals. I cannot stress to you how painful these decisions were. And I want to thank every affected employee for their tireless work. These were not decisions anyone wanted to make, and their contribution to our impact over their tenure will not be forgotten. Our attention is, of course, also focused on our remaining employees. And just this past week, Marcia Silverberg facilitated a session on leading through change with our supervisors. We are all grieving in different ways, and we are leaner than we were as a staff team. This is a transition for all of us, and we are committed to checking in with our team on a regular basis to understand how we can support each other during this time. Additionally, the Employee Assistance Program, as you see here, is available to any current employee or any member of their household. You now have a sense of our process and the steps we took to get to where we are today. And Abby will now share more detail about our reorganization and what it will look like into the future in the coming year or so.
Thank you so much, Daniel, and many thanks to Rick. And on a personal note, I want to say what an honor and a privilege it has been to work with both of you so very closely during this time. In a crisis, you learn a lot about an organization's leadership. And I just want to say, Daniel, on behalf of this community, your graceful and ethical leadership has truly set an example for all of us to follow. And while he's not on the call, I have to tell you all that I cannot imagine a better partner than Rick Rosenberg as we navigate this rocky road. As you all could see from the previous presentations, while we've coped with this ever-changing nature of the crisis, I'm proud to say that as an organization, from our board to our staff, I think we've all kept front of mind the critical question of what do we want Shalom Austin to be? We've known from the outset that the decisions that we make in this crisis will open and close doors. And I think, to Daniel's point, we've all been very clear on the stakes. And yet, we've also seen an outpouring of goodwill and commitment that has been truly inspiring. At a time when all of us are struggling with precarity in our own lives, I know I have been stunned to see the manner in which so many of you on this call have stepped up. I particularly want to acknowledge our Shalom Austin board members who met weekly for months to ensure that we were staying up to speed. This period has required far more from our lay leadership than they signed up for, and yet no one has hesitated to show up and lean in. From volunteers for task forces to help manage certain situations to other community organizations and leaders that have come to us asking how they can help. It has truly been a powerful time to see how necessary and how valued Shalom Austin's work is. So I've been tasked with telling you about our plans for the future, and many of those plans began months ago as we took stock of this situation. We knew we weren't the only community organization hurting, and so very quickly, as you heard, we began to convene Jewish organizations and institutions across Central Texas to see what we could do to help. We offered sessions on contingency financial planning and reopening guidelines. We also shared the scenario planning toolkit that you heard about from Daniel. You also heard about our COVID-19 Community Response Fund that launched with a generous matching gift from the ever-amazing Phil and Adam Lowy. As Daniel noted, that fund has raised over $250,000 in unrestricted funds that include dollars that will go to our partner organizations, as well as scholarships for the ECP and support for our emergency financial assistance programs. We're really proud that even in some of our lowest moments as an organization, we recognize this need to convene and to support the broader community. And we're so grateful that so many organizations have stood by our side. More than 18 Jewish groups and institutions have signed a letter supporting our COVID-19 response fund, and we are so grateful to everyone who continues to support this effort. As we saw in many of the questions, a lot of you want to know what you can do to help right now. And after Rick's presentation, you'll know that encouraging friends and family to donate to our annual campaign has never been more critical. Most of our revenue streams remain shaky, and philanthropy, the generosity of this community, is what's going to see us through as we work to rebuild. I want to echo Rick in saying to so many of you who have already made multi-year pledges, who have increased your gifts or have gotten gifts in early, thank you, thank you, thank you. Please know how grateful we are. Another way you can give is your time and talent. We'll be enhancing our volunteer program to help serve our community to the greatest extent possible. We are putting an email contact in the chat right now. So if you are interested in learning more about these volunteer opportunities, please email and we will get you connected. And of course, you can attend Zoom events. You can invite a friend. And you can let us know how we're doing, and you can let us know where you see opportunities. I think the other thing you can do to help is to give us a bit of grace. Some of the decisions we've had to make are deeply, deeply painful. And as Daniel said, these aren't the choices that any of us wanted to confront, and yet here we are. While we're leveraging national and regional opportunities, some of our favorite local activities, from large in-person gatherings to much of our local in-person arts and culture programming to leadership training, have all had to be put on hold for now. We've had to say goodbye to amazing staff members. So when you see that something is missing, when you hear a friend complain, I'm going to ask you as a fellow community member to please consider that in a moment when very few options felt good, we have truly always tried to prioritize the continuity of Shalom Austin. We have sought to ensure above all that this organization will be here for our children and our children's children, and that has been a guiding principle from the day this crisis started. To that end, I also want to identify many of the key areas that we're going to amplify and prioritize in the coming months. Most importantly, we are committed to supporting those most vulnerable and at risk in our community. We will ensure that we have sufficient funding for emergency financial assistance, and we've already raised funds specifically for this purpose. We're already increasing our efforts to reach out to those most impacted by the COVID crisis. You heard about the tremendous work that Women's Philanthropy has already done with our seniors, and we're developing creative ways to safely engage with our young adults, many of whom have arrived in Austin without family or much social support. In addition to seniors and young adults, we're also doing our utmost to support families with young and school-aged children. As many of you know, through a tremendous amount of planning and with expert advice, we developed a plan to open our ECP safely, and we've been open for our youngest community members since early July. Additionally, when it became clear that the Austin schools would not be opening in August, our extraordinary Life and Learning team created All Day at the J, a way for families to give their kids a place to be during the workday. And perhaps most importantly, we're ensuring these childcare options are available to all families because, as I said, we're increasing our scholarships even as we find new ways to cope. And here I have to give a particular shout out to our extraordinary ECP community who raised funds for scholarships back in May to help keep this special part of our community whole. We also know our kids and adults desperately miss the physical activities that give us both great exercise and socialization. We're actively exploring socially distanced sports and wellness activities for both kids and adults. Especially as the weather gets a little cooler, we plan to build engagement and programming around small groups and outdoor activities, trying to create small microcosms of community outdoors. We're also benefiting from our close partnerships with regional and national organizations. As Daniel already noted, we've been able to take tremendous advantage of the resources from the JCC Association and the Jewish Federations of North America. Thanks to the wonderful community volunteers and the new RISE program, we're able to start offering vocational training and placement support for Jewish professionals who are looking for their next chapter. We're leveraging partnerships for arts and culture, partnering with 100 JCCs to present a large national book festival that's being coordinated out of the Atlanta JCC. And as a result of that partnership, we're able to bring some of the best writers from across the country. And in the midst of so much need and so many challenges, we're also investing in our future. The Generations Project began more than 5 years ago with designated donations that could only be used that could only be used for their intended purpose of building a new, improved facility that would bolster both our organization's financial situation and our ability to convene and bring people together. This is a critical project that's been the product of countless individuals' hard work and commitment. But I have to give a few special shout outs at this moment to a few individuals without whom we would never have gotten to this point. Keith Zimmerman and Judy Waxman are fearless campaign chairs. Harriet Kirsch-Posen and Janet Elam, who have both provided extraordinary staffing, both in our fundraising phase and now in our building phase, as well as the leaders of our building committee, David Ferdman, Daniel Carl, and now Brad Stein. Many, many, many thanks to all of you. Even during our most difficult periods, we've never lost focus on the importance of this capital campaign. And I'm so proud to tell you all that we are well on our way. When our youngest community members finally arrived back on campus, they were greeted by a refreshed education building with paint, lighting, and a crisp, clean lobby that is COVID compliant. Our children are in newly refreshed classrooms, and later this fall, there will be a new roof and HVAC unit, making it a more efficient leak-proof building, benefiting every child in our care and our partners. There's also our coming aquatic center and tennis court. And y'all, this is going to be really exciting, so get ready. I want everyone to imagine arriving at our campus next summer. You'll see people of all ages coming to the aquatic center. Young families will play at a brand new activities pool that features cascading water, sprinklers, buckets, little slides. The main pool will be expanded with more space for lessons and a much greater capacity for lap swimming. The lap swimmers get excited. And then there will be 2 enormous slides for big kids and perhaps even some fearless adults to make sure this space is truly meant for all ages. There will be room for nearly double the number of swimmers, as well as a snack bar, which we plan to stock with food from food trucks sitting nearby. And we'll have our tennis courts up and running, as well as tennis pros available for lessons. This isn't a far-off vision. We're talking about opening next summer. We are so excited. And as I said at the beginning of my remarks, we're probably also going to need your grace. We will have to close the pool this fall. And we know, since we're one of the only pools open in the city, that that's going to be very hard on many of our members. We're working diligently to find alternative pools for our members while we're shut down, but I'm going to be candid and say it's been hard. Very few pools are open right now. We're one of the only ones. And so I'm going to ask you, like I started, to please stick with us, even while our pool is temporarily closed. Support us, and I promise you will be so glad that you did. We are building something special, multi-generational, and unlike anything else available in this city. And our current members, you all, will be the ones to benefit, both in terms of access and price and so much more, as we all know. The time is now. I am beyond excited to say that we have a date for the groundbreaking, and you are all invited to be part of the virtual experience. This is a period of tremendous fear and challenge. We're seeing it locally and globally. And in a time that's inundated with so much uncertainty, a sense of community has never been more important. I know I personally have taken so much strength in Shalom Austin as a pluralistic Jewish organization. We welcome everyone. We provide space, both literal and digital, for wellness, for learning, for socializing. In a time when there is so much brokenness, it's not hard to find. I just want to thank you all so much for helping us to build this special organization that's about wholeness and coming together. Generations have worked to build this Jewish community that we have now, and I am so grateful to all of you for helping to ensure its continuity. Lashana Tova to you and your family, and now let me turn it back to Daniel.
Thank you, Abby. That was beautifully articulated and delivered. And again, I just can't thank her enough for her partnership. You can see her tremendous leadership that she brings to the community, and we would not be able to do this without her and without the entire board and all of you. We wanted to end with prayer, and I want to take a moment to pause and to thank the Rapoport Center leaders, specifically our Chief Learning and Engagement Officer, Rachel Stern, and Alachua Nazarenko, and all those who've been involved in helping to put together these videos, and specifically our Austin congregational clergy, who are the spiritual leaders of our community. We'd like to leave you with this last Shana Tova blessing to end our program tonight.
Shana Tova. My New Year's wishes and blessings for each of us is, of course, continued good health, sustained opportunities for courage, and the ability to discern what is indispensable for us in each moment. May we have a sweet, good new year, and may we be well together.
May we be blessed in the year ahead with an ever-deepening sense of unity, even as we are nourished by our diversity.
My blessing for this coming year is that each of us are able to find time in every week to stop and allow the goodness and kindness of our lives to catch up to us. As it says in Psalm 23, Ach tov v'chesed yardafuni kol yamei chayai.
My blessing is that you and those you love and our whole world should know safety, peace, equality, justice, and healing.
That we all have a year of health, happiness, and redemption.
My blessing for the coming year is that we find strength when we feel weakness, that we see light through the darkness, and that we continue to strive to see the goodness in our fellow human being.
My blessing for the coming year is that we break down the artificial boundaries created by artificial bonds which cause us to be living together apart.
At the end of Yom Kippur, as at the end of Pesach, we say, V'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. This year, We are celebrating our holiday season under unusual circumstances, physically apart, though spiritually together. Next year, may it be God's will that we are celebrating these holidays together in person. Shana Tova.
My blessing for the coming year is the fervent belief that the world will become sane again. Shana Tova, y'all.
Thank you for attending tonight's State of Shalom Austin. I want to wish each of you a Shana Tova, Umetuka, a sweet, happy, and healthy new year. I know that by standing together as we have through this crisis and continuing to stand together, that we will make our way through the wilderness and into the promised land that we all desire in our hearts and our minds and our souls. Shana Tova. Take care. Thank you.